Then I shall start. You'll notice there is a cook in the front of this kitchen, and he's saying, "Who the hell is this guy, Ivan Day?" He's an Irishman who lives in the United Kingdom. He won't know anything at all about kitchens in this part of the world, in the Holy Roman Empire, the Habsburg Empire. To tell you the truth, I live in a 400-year-old house, not a noble house like this, it's a farmhouse. But I have a kitchen, and for 45 years, I've been able to cook using these techniques. So I have a long period of working in my own kitchen, but I've also worked in other great kitchens in the UK, in France, in Holland, in Italy, in Spain, in Belgium, and also in the United States, which is an important thing. So this painting is actually a copy of the kind of kitchen that we have here in the Bellaria, and it's a copy from an early painting, maybe from the early 18th century, but it was painted in the 19th century, and it's in Friedland, you know, up near the Polish border. And I've been to the house. It was a Clamgalas house, a kind of hunting castle. And the kitchen there is more 19th century with English influences. This old style of kitchen has disappeared. This is the kitchen that we have restored. Pavel has spent a lot of time restoring the great theatre here, the wonderful masquerading ballroom, and finally, this miracle of history, the Bellaria, which not only has these wonderful Rococo salons, it also has a basement kitchen. And next to the basement kitchen is the winding mechanism that sends this miracle of a table which levitates up into the room above. And you're going to see that working a little bit later on. I want to talk about the kitchen, but I want to talk it from a comparative point of view, because I'm used to using kitchens that are very different in Italy, in France, in Northern Europe, but not here in Eastern Europe. And of course, what distinguishes this kitchen so much is this cooking platform. The fireplace is raised up to waist level, as in the first image I showed you. I want you to notice two things. To the right of the fireplace, you can see a little square oven, which is very important because it's been a mystery until just recently how it was used. And you'll be able to see it when you go into the kitchen. But that's one very important feature. But look, I'm used to working in kitchens like this. This is the palace at Hampton Court where Henry VIII of England lived. And you can see that the fire is down here on the ground, okay? Which causes some major problems for the workers because A, they sometimes have to have a saucepan and put it on the ashes. Down here, you get a backache, okay? Also, if you're turning the spits around to roast, you have to sit down on some kind of chair and do it like this. But the other problem is real danger from the fire itself. The fire is down on the ground, and especially women working in these kitchens, they had many, many accidents. Their clothing caught fire, and the treatment in hospitals was non-existent for serious burns. And we have historical records of many, many accidents, mainly with women working in kitchens. This is an Italian range. This is from 1570. And this is the kitchen of one of the popes. they too would roast their meats on a fire that's down here on the ground. This is one of the kitchens I worked in England, which is 15th century, and it's exactly the same. The fire is on the floor. We call it a down hearth, that's the name for it. It's good, you can do some really good cooking. And in a big palace kitchen, you're cooking sometimes for hundreds of people, not just the king, the queen and their family, but for the court and the servants too. And at this palace, they had a number of different kitchens. The king's food was cooked in a private kitchen. His wife, the queen, her food was cooked in another kitchen. This one was for cooking mainly for the courtiers. You can see these racks leaning against the wall. In English, we call them cob irons. And you can put a spit, and this little hook will hold it, and you can turn the spit by hand. Some foods, like fish, were difficult, because as the meat cooked, it got soft, and the fish would fall in the fire. So they sometimes used to have twigs from the hazel tree, and they tied it on with tape so that it kept the fish together. That was a very old method. When I was here earlier in the year, we cooked some pike, some local pike, using this technique. But the fire is on the ground, it's on the ground. Now, this is the Bellaria kitchen, and we roasted this young pig last time I was here, but we did it on a fire that is at waist level. And any women, particularly with loose clothing, would find it much, much safer to work at these conditions. So in Italy and in England and in France, we did have a raised way of cooking at waist level, which was when we're doing fine cooking, making sauces and more complicated ragouts and stews. This is called a potager, or a stewing stove, and each of these little things has a little fire in, and you're able to cook very carefully at this level. So this is an Italian one from 1570. This is one in England from about 100 years later, from about 1660. And you can see, you light the fire in the little square hole, and you can put saucepans on the top. And the arches are for storing the fuel. You put the wood underneath at the bottom. And this is how they were used. They often had these big pots. This again is at Hampton Court. So you've got this very comfortable way of cooking fine foods, stews, potage, ragouts, but roasting was always done in England and in France and Italy low down, and was a very laborious, back-breaking business. This is one of the earliest images I've been able to find of the type of cooking method we have here in the Bellaria. This is a 15th century painting that you can see in Vienna. And can you see this lady is working on this raised platform. She's got saucepans cooking soup or stews or even vegetables, but she has the fire here in front of her, not on the ground. There were huge advantages to this, and I do not understand why it never happened in France and Italy, a little bit in Northern Europe, in Sweden and in Finland particularly, they used it, but they never caught on. It was much safer, and also your back was also in better shape. So here is this quite interesting table in this local castle here, quite close to where Milan lives actually, And you can see the cooking table, and there's a hood above which the smoke goes up through the hood into the chimney. This is another very early image. This is a German woodcut from a 15th century incunabulum, and it shows a woman multitasking. You know, she's stirring something. Women can do that, men are no good. And you can see that there's this strange windmill. Can you see the windmill over the chimney? The rising heat turns the windmill round, and with clockwork, she is able to turn the meat on the spit. Amazingly, this mechanism on the right, which is actually Austrian, very close neighbor, same kind of culture, that is an 18th century one, which like an umbrella, but when the heat comes from the fire, it goes round and it turns the spits. You probably can't see, but in the woodcut on the left, you can see on the spit there is a chicken. There's a chicken. And you probably won't be able to see from there, but its neck has been stretched under its wing. And we're going to be cooking some tomorrow using that method. It's a very ancient method. These are two wonderful images that were published in Prague in the 16th century. And they show a number of things. Sometimes these platforms didn't work very well. Can you see how the smoke is going up and then escaping out of the chimney? We have that problem here sometimes. If, for instance, the wind is in the wrong direction, and designing these canopies was a real skill. The one here works extremely well in this kitchen. It's very good, but it depends sometimes on someone leaving a door open or the wind coming down the chimney. You can see here that these men are turning the meat by hand. And here is another one, exactly the same. It's such a comfortable way to cook on this level. You can see also, this is a rope coming down from above with a clockwork mechanism turning the spit again. And here is a really interesting example. And it basically has, I can't use this because it doesn't show you, but can you see at the front, there's two little squares. That is a stewing stove, like the ones I showed you from Italy and from England. And also at the back, there's a big oven as well. So you have an area for roasting meat, for cooking fine food, and for baking, all combined in this extraordinary kitchen, which is very, very similar to here. You've got this hood over the top, the smoke goes up. Now, of course, this practice happened all over Eastern Europe, Central Europe, up into Scandinavia. This is probably one of the most aristocratic of all these kitchens with a raised platform. It's at Amelienburg, which is near Nymphenburg. It's a hunting lodge. And of course, it's got this wonderful chinoiserie tiled interior, and it was just really for hunting parties. But just behind it, you can see there's also the raised stewing stove. So they would roast on top of the platform and do the fine cookery at the back. I'm going to show you 4 images of 18th and early 19th century cookery book illustrations, all published in Vienna, and you can see these female cooks with their long dresses, their aprons. They look very content and happy working with this system of the, whereas in France, England, and Italy, the hospitals were full of women who had terrible burns from working with fires on the ground. So for me, the kitchen here is very, very sensible design. It's better than any kitchen that I've ever worked on in England, Ireland, France, Italy. It's a perfect way of cooking. And again, you can see they're roasting meat using some kind of a spit engine, and on the right, and they're safe, content, and they don't have this problem that I have when I work in my old kitchen. This is an interesting contrast because on the left, we have a kitchen scene from England at the time that this building was built, round about that time, a little bit later. You can see the fireplace. What's happened is they're no longer burning wood, they're burning coal. And to burn coal, you have to lift up the fireplace off the ground because it needs air to come underneath. Otherwise, the fire goes out. But you can see that they're roasting a little pig in front of the fire, and it's still quite dangerous, particularly when you are stewing stock. The big pot on the fire on the left has got bones and meat in to make bouillon, which is an essential part of making soups and sauces. And that's continuously being used throughout the day, every day, to produce. It's happening today at the moment downstairs. They're actually making this bouillon over the fire. And the danger is you have to get that off the fire, and it has got an enormous amount of boiling liquid in it. That was the other issue, was danger from getting scalded with hot fire. And these women were particularly vulnerable. That is huge. And can you see, how did they get that off that fire? It wasn't easy. Whereas in Italy, as you can see, they had something called an instrumento, which was for getting every big cauldron off the fire. It's quite an amusing illustration of these guys with this huge thing to get the fire off, get it off the fire safely. We don't need an instrumento because we have Richard here, you know, and Richard looks after our pot, and it's got this wonderful design of a crane which swings right out, and it's possible to get that very large pot off safely. So what's interesting here is that the kitchen staff were treated with a lot of respect from the point of view that their noble employers were concerned about their safety, and they were trying to avoid kitchen accidents. So this kitchen is a model example of a kitchen which got a lot of fire in it. It's like a pyrotechnic's dream, but it's a safe place to work in. And of course, this is a really interesting image, which is basically, I think, in the collection here in Český Krumlov. And if you look, you can see, I have to go to the front to show you. That's the stewing stove, but you can also grill. You can have a gridiron and put chops, bacon, can you see, over the top of it, as well as cooking in the pot. But one very interesting detail in this, which is extraordinary, is this little boy. And he has got a hair. You probably can't see it very clearly, but he has a needle, and he is sewing into the hair little strips of pork fat. Hare meat is very dry. When you roast it in front of the fire, it needs lubrication. So the fat melts and it helps the hare cook more succulently. It's much more juicy than if you didn't do that. What's interesting is he is a child. And we'll come to that a little bit later on. And this is one of the tasks that I now understand was often done by young children because they've got very small fingers. You'll see why in a minute. And this is a kitchen from the second half of the 18th century, contemporary with this one, but it was in Augsburg, okay, in Augsburg, not very far away. And this is remarkable because this is really our kitchen here, one that is almost identical to this kitchen. And I want to show you two things. On the cooking table, the stone table, there is an iron mechanism for turning the spit. And you have to wind it up, and the rope, can you see the rope I pointed out? It has a weight on the end. So you wind that round, and it will start turning the spit. So we have one which is almost identical to this painting. But the thing that we've recently discovered about this painting, which is just wonderful, is this. It's probably difficult for you to see, but this is an oven that is built on the right-hand side of the stone table. If you look very carefully, you can see a pipe coming out of the back of it. And there's very dark smoke coming out of that pipe, but it's going into the same chimney that the white smoke, which is coming from the fire for roasting. And we have an oven here. It's been a bit of a mystery because we weren't sure why it was there and how it worked. We now know how it works, and Pavel is very excited about this. And this is the clue. Looking at these images is often really, really helpful in understanding the processes that went on in these historic kitchens. So this is really the closest image we have to our kitchen below that I've ever actually seen. And this is another very good one too. I was looking at the original copy of this today in the library. This is an engraving in a book by a Finnish writer. It's a book of Proverbs, and you can see, again, this mechanism with the long spit. This is a different sort of mechanism. It has a thing called a fusee, which is this cone here. And what it does is that there's a spring in the big round thing below, and as it turns, the kind of mechanical energy diminishes. So it's able to keep it turning at the same speed all the time. The first image, if we have one of these, is Italian on the right. It's very close to this one. This is an illustration from a book written in Prague in the 19th century, when they were still using these. So this sort, as well as the one with the weight, was being used in this region until the 19th century, probably till the very late 19th century. And there is one, an Austrian one, same region really, same system, which is in that wonderful kitchen. This is the Bellaria one. You can see the rope. That's the winding thing. You're going to see it working, and you'll see meat being cooked on it while you're here. Now, the little boy in the image earlier on, I said he had a needle, and he was sewing the fat into, this is veal, which is very dry, like venison. It's very dry. So this fat gives it extra succulence, makes it much nicer to eat, especially when you roast it in front of the fire. It's very difficult to do. It's really difficult work. This is a wonderful Meissen figure of a woman who is holding up a hare. Can you see she's larded it with the little strips? That's the fat, and that's her pin. There's a block of fat and her pin. But look at this. This is a French painting from the early 18th century. And if I show you in close-up, can you see that these are partridges, very small birds. I'm convinced that it's like embroidery. It's like very fine embroidery. Would have been done by a child. I've tried to do it. My fingers are too big. I can't do it like that. That is absolutely extraordinary. And you can see the lengths that aristocratic diners wanted their staff to go to do cookery as fine as that. And it's absolutely wonderful that illustration of a Czech kitchen has got a little boy doing this. I find it quite extraordinary. Now, I talked about the stewing stove. Basically, you have a hole, you put the charcoal in it. It's not, we tend to you burn charcoal rather than wood, and you lift the pan up with a tripod, a trivet underneath. If you want it to go lower down, you could turn the trivet the other way around, like as in this, where one of our friends is there. Can you see she's lowered it down? So you can vary the heat by just getting it higher or lower. And look how safe she is. She's happy being on that level. This is a wonderful kitchen. It's a great design. It's absolutely extraordinary to work in. Now, I'd like to end by showing you an English kitchen. This is a remarkable kitchen that was put into a castle in England. The castle was built in 1809, but this kitchen was put in when Kaiser Wilhelm II visited the castle. This new kitchen was put in, and can you see that the fireplace, the fire is still on the ground, and that mechanism turns spits in all sorts of ways. Now the castle is this place here in England. This is just up the road at Hubloka, and it has an English kitchen. But do you notice that even here, thank God, it's on a raised platform? Why the English didn't do this, I do not understand. It was pretty stupid, really, you know. So what's wonderful is that this Hubloka castle was heavily influenced by this castle in England, this Lowther Castle. And this kitchen was put in at the same time, or a little bit earlier, than the one in Lowther Castle I showed you, this one here. It's contemporary with that. So they thought, oh, English kitchens are great, but no, we want to cook above, not below, on the ground. Some very simple points there, but to somebody working in a place like this, you could fear for your life if you had to work in a kitchen with a fire on the ground. So for me, I've worked in hundreds of period kitchens all over Europe. This is one of the most interesting I've ever worked in, because the comfort of the staff and their well-being is really important in the design of the kitchen. And when you go down there and see people working, think about that. It is a very important thing to be safe and to feel comfortable and not go to bed, you know, like this. Very simple point, but it's important. So thank you very much.